Well, welcome to this special edition of OC Spotlight, where we're going to talk with some people about how to stream, how to get your show up on the internet. Take your podcast to new levels here. So that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to start by introducing ourselves. And there I am. I'm Paul Roberts. I'm the founder and force behind a thing called OC Talk Radio. If you haven't looked it up, please do so. We've been around for 10 years. We're a hybrid. We're an internet radio station. What does that mean? It's kind of like live podcasting. We stream all of our shows live over our channel, octalkradio.net or octalkradio.biz, B-I-Z. So you can see our show, listen to our shows live. We also, and then we turn those into podcasts, and that's truthfully where most people listen to it. But we have that live element to it too, that we think takes it from just being a podcast into live radio. A whole bunch of shows live streamed over our station. A few years ago, we started adding video as well to the mix. I don't know why anybody wants to watch two people talking to a microphone like I'm doing here today, but it's crazy. It's Rush Limbaugh. It's Howard Stern. It's a movie set. So the minute we live stream it to YouTube and our Facebook channel and other places, we get a whole nother audience that comes in. And then that immediately gets turned into a video. So some people, I can't tell you the number of people who come into our studio. We do about 25 different business shows here, all half-hour live stream shows each week. And so many of our guests say, I listened to you on YouTube. You listened on a TV channel. I don't get it. But that's what many people do. So the MP3 version, the audio version, resides on all our podcast channels on everything from iTunes to iHeart, Spreaker, Stitcher, SoundCloud, all those. You can find an OC Talk Radio channel with all of our shows. You can listen to them live, or you can watch them live on YouTube and watch them later as a video, and Facebook and other places. So it's kind of live streamed podcasting, which is a conflict, right? It's a contradiction in terms. Podcasting is supposed to be recorded content that you can listen to whenever. We've added this live streamed element because most of the social media out there, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, are encouraging people to stream live. There is something urgent. You can watch what my cat's doing anytime, but here's what my cat's doing right now. So there's a certain urgency to watch. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, how we do some of that live stream. We're not going to talk so much about creating a podcast, although we may have to cover some of that, just so everybody understands what a podcast is and how it works and some of the complexities of putting together a podcast. But we're going to talk about some of those live streamed elements today. And we have with us, I was shocked. I thought we had like 15 people sign up for it, but we've had 2 show up. So let's let them identify themselves here, and we'll make this a participation and not just a lecture here today. So who have we got? Let's start with, is it Eileen? Is that the first one that's here?
Yes, hi. Good morning.
So tell us who you are, Eileen, and why are you here today?
I am interested in establishing a podcast for myself. I recently wrote a book on overcoming adversity. I really enjoyed interviewing the individuals and would like to be able to help tell some of these stories and identify how people move through the issues and find resilience. The reason I'm here today is really to understand some of the nitty-gritty details that are involved, and there's so many.
So you don't have a podcast yet, but you're hoping to do it. And certainly, what better time to talk about how to make it through adversity than the most adverse times I've seen in a generation here?
No.
I mean, it's insane. Okay, and our other guest, was it Ann? Is that the other person?
It's Ann. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So tell us.
Hey, I'm just kind of curious about podcasts because I don't have one. I'm thinking maybe in the future, but I don't have a date set. And
so
I saw this. I thought, wow, this is educational. I get an opportunity to learn from somebody who's been doing it.
Okay, well,
I thought I'd take advantage of it.
So you're a voyeur today here. You're just.
I'm a voyeur, absolutely.
All right. There's a lot of voyeurs in the world here. You know, what is it about social media and podcasts? We're all interested in hearing and watching other people's stories more than we are the professional stories that have been put out on network TV or other places. It's shocking to me. When I started podcasting, and I'll just give you a real quick background. When I started podcasting, it was sort of as an experiment. I had been in real radio, as you can probably tell by the voice, WMYK, K94. I had been in real radio a million years ago and gotten out of it when it became automated and boring. And I used to just come in at the last station I was at in Norfolk, Virginia. I'd come in and I'd say, that was the Beatles, that was the Beach Boys, and then I'd leave. And they'd put it all together. I thought, that's not radio. We're not telling stories. We're not talking to people. So I discovered podcasting by accident, and I thought, well, this is kind of what I did as a kid, and I started experimenting with it, originally for business and telling business stories because I had a PR firm, and I was trying to help clients tell their stories. And then I came to this epiphany, what if we did it live? Is that radio? It kind of is. Radio to me is live, and it's a bunch of shows all streaming or being played over one channel. So that's what led to this crazy incarnation we call OC Talk Radio. And it helped that in Orange County, the 5th biggest county in America, we have no radio stations left anymore. I think there's one little religious one. That's it. So I thought it kind of felt a need. And what I really had to discover is, what is podcasting? And I'll give you a couple ideas of what I think it is. This is just for me. This is not from any book. This is from 10 years of doing it and thousands of episodes now. I think podcasting is something we haven't seen in a long time. The Columbia School of Journalism did an article a couple of years ago that I quote all the time, and it said, this is a weird medium. Everything else is getting shorter and more condensed. Twitter, well, they've doubled it to 240 characters, but it's still a snippet, a soundbite. The average time people spend on a website is 30 seconds. What can you learn in 30 seconds? Not much. So we're always trying to get it faster, shorter, quicker, more condensed, sound bites, snippets. And here's the only medium they said going the other way. I think that's because of it's because of a hunger to go back to long form storytelling, something more than just a sound bite. And the fact that we're stuck in cars, stuck at a gym, out walking. We can't watch, we can't read, so tell me a story. And so, in my opinion, this is the return of storytelling. And the success of the big podcasts, the ones we all know about, Serial, that put it on the map a few years ago, the serialized story of a serial murderer each week. Did he? Didn't he? Yes? No? I don't know, boys and girls. Tune in next week and we'll take another look at it. We'll give you another aspect. That idea of long, slow, maybe even serialized storytelling is caught everybody's imagination. But if you go back to the 1920s and the 1930s, that's what radio was. It was serialized stories. The Shadow, Batman. Every week he was the Lone Ranger. Every week he was hanging on a cliff and you had to come back. That's the way they did movies. That's the way they did TV shows. That's the way they did everything. So I think it's a return to long-form storytelling, and the power of it has yet to be fully grasped because you get more than 30 seconds to tell your story. You get 30 minutes. Podcasts are all over the place. The early ones, the Joe Rogans of the world, the comedy ones, Mark Maron, they're all 2-3 hours. They're trying to mimic real radio. When I was in real radio, you did 2-3 hour shifts. I think it's moved away from that. But I don't think it's ever going to get to a soundbite again. I say it's 30 minutes. It's like a TED Talk. It's the average TED Talk's 20 minutes. They've experimented with every format under the world. I saw the guy who started it years ago. He said, I don't know why 20 minutes is it, but it is. I think I do know why it's 20 minutes, because that's the average gym time, walk time, drive time. So people have got 20, 30 minutes to kill, and they can't watch, they can't read. So tell me a story, boys and girls. And that's what this is about. I don't think it's a way necessarily to give facts and figures as well. That's better charts. I don't think it's emotional in a different way. It's not a visual emotional thing. It's very intimate. Like here we are today here. I said voyeur. It has that kind of intimate feel to it. You're listening to somebody and they're in your head, literally. So you tend to get very close connections to people. And if they like and come back, they become very fanatical followers. They become very passionate about what you're doing. So I think it's a whole new medium. I don't think it's just, I used to just think it's just recorded radio. I think it's a new medium designed to tell new stories in an old-fashioned, but what seems new to us way, long-form storytelling. So I'll stop there. Does that make sense to you guys here? Eileen, what do you think of that?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Have
I
you,
agree. Mhm.
so you have to think of it that way. You have to think of it as, do I have a story to tell, and is it more than one story? So I really believe that podcasting, when it's best, is not what I'm doing now, one person talking. I think it's a conversation. It's your little fly on the wall listening to two people talking at the bar, at the gym. You know, you're sort of, and I think that's why they sort of voyeurism is part of it. You're sort of, sneaking in and listening to somebody's intimate conversations about something, sharing their knowledge, sharing their stories, sharing their ideas, and you get to vicariously participate in that. It doesn't tend to be real participatory. We try to get people to call in and tweet in and stuff. They really are just listening. And as you two are listening to me here today. So I think it's a different, I think you have to approach it. What kinds of stories can you tell with it? And how are you going to do this? So I think the best way is to figure out what is your story and who else can you bring in to help tell that story? Because I really do think this is narrow casting. This is niche marketing. Everybody today still wants to do broadcasting. I want to tell one story that 1 million people listen to. We really think it's narrow casting. If I'd rather get 1,000 people listening to 1,000 different shows. The narrower you define it, the easier it is to find your audience. So if we did a show on orthopedic surgery, which we don't, I don't think there'd be a lot of people listening. But who would listen? Orthopedic surgeons, people in that field. Who else would listen to it? So our most popular shows are the ones that are real niche oriented. We do a couple of shows on HR. I'm going to argue it's the dullest show we do on the network here. HR people are real tightly wound up and real tightly controlled and everything's perfect. But it's a very complex field today. And to the extent we can get them to share and open up and be vulnerable, that's a key with your guests. You've got to get them to open up and tell you something other than just the happy story, the sound bite, to get them to be real, to be open, to be honest. That's what social media craves here. To the extent we can get them to open up and really talk about the issues and problems and concerns and questions and doubts, the show becomes very interesting to those in that field. And so we get, a typical podcast might only get, I think I read a statistic a few years ago that the average podcast gets less than 500, a couple hundred downloads a month. We certainly have some shows like that, but I'm going to say we have shows that get 5, 10, 20,000. Now, again, I say it's not about how many, it's who listens, but of course everybody wants to know, yeah, but how many? So I don't think it's a way to reach a broad market. I mean, clearly I'm wrong in the sense that there are big podcasts that get big numbers, but I don't think that's where the medium's going to go. I think it's going to be like what happened when I was a kid. There were 3 TV channels. Now then there were 300 cable channels. Now there's 3 billion YouTube channels. I think that's it. You're going to break the whole audience down into little tiny tribes, into little tiny segments, and find that segment that you can own, that nobody else does but you. That point of view, that topic, that expertise. Find that one thing and build an audience around it. And don't worry about how many. Worry about who. If you've got that audience, they'll passionately follow you. And then you can figure out, what do you want to get out of it? And I'll end by saying, at least this segment, here's the problem. It ain't YouTube. When podcasting was created accidentally, really accidentally by iTunes, they had created a new iTunes store. Nobody's ever told it this way, but this is kind of my take on the story. Because nobody's really identified, nobody's ever spoken at iTunes, at Apple, why they created podcasting. It was just an accident. They had an iTunes store with no tunes in it. They hadn't struck deals with most of the record companies yet. So somebody said, well, if you want to put something up and store it somewhere and forward it to us, we're not going to store it. But if you want to save it somewhere and push it to us, we'll give you a page. What the heck? It's free content for us. Maybe somebody, when they come to hear your show or your song, they'll end up buying something from us, an app, a song or something. So it was just that. It was just free stuff to fill up the store. And to this day, Apple and all the others kind of still approach it that way. They don't measure it. They don't monitor it. They don't put pre-roll ads. They don't do anything around it. It's exploded this space, and nobody makes any money off of it. YouTube came along 3 years later in 2008. This was 2005, the podcasting was started. And they came along in 2008 and said, we got a whole different idea. We're going to do video, not audio, and send us your cat video. And people said, are you nuts? Do you know how many videos they'll send you? Billions of them. And they said, we don't care. We'll store them all. We'll build giant storage farms, and we'll store them all because we'll own the content. And that's all we're selling, is that viewership. So they very cleverly collected all this crap. They got free content, and people started watching it. So it cost them nothing to produce their programming. And as people came, they ran pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll ads and forced you to watch these things. And then they even got generous enough when they started making enough money. If you had enough viewers on your channel, they started sharing it with you. And of course, there are YouTubers out there that make millions of dollars a year now, literally, off of their millions of viewers. None of that happens in podcasting. None of it. Because nobody's making any money off of it. So everybody says, well, I hope I get 1 million viewers so I can quit my job. You could have 1 million listeners on a podcast. Nobody gives you a nickel. You have 1 million viewers on your YouTube, you're going to make a lot of money. 2 different systems set up 2 different purposes. And so people are always disappointed when they find out podcasting is not by itself a way to do it. You can try and sell ads yourself and sell sponsorship, but it's not easy. And part of it is you can't really show what happened. All right, so, and again, we're dealing with niches. So, gee, I can do a show on orthopedic surgery, and I got 1,000 orthopedic surgeons. Well, gee, that doesn't sound very exciting. The average podcast advertiser will give you $25 per 1,000 downloads. So if you got 1,000 downloads of 1,000 surgeons, they give you $25. Unless you find that orthopedic surgery company that wants to sell giant equipment to these guys and can't get in front of them, they might give you a lot more than that because you've collected an audience that they find valuable. But it's a niche. It's a small audience. So very hard to make money off of podcasting. So why do my businesses do it? They do it. We've discovered 6 other reasons. Now we're talking about business podcasts, not personal podcasts. How do we make money off of it? I can meet people I never thought I would. Hey, can I take you to lunch and tell you about my accounting firm? No. How about being on my podcast? Oh, you got a podcast or a radio show? Because we do it live. Radio show, it sounds even better. Yeah, I'll come in and meet you. And suddenly I've met somebody and started a conversation with somebody I could never get to meet. They share that with their audience then. Can I put an ad on your site? No. How about if I interview you and give you a copy of it to put on your site? Yeah, I'll put it up forever. Now you know it has my ad in it. It's about me. Yeah, but you interviewed me. So it can be a powerful way to prospect, to network, to meet people, to start conversations. Powerful way then when they share that with their community to virally spread your message, get in front of their audience, and content. Google and everybody else gives high marks if you create original content, because their mandate isn't just when somebody searches for orthopedic surgeon, they don't want to just show you the biggest site, they want to show you the best site. And they measure that in a lot of ways. How many people come back? How long do they stay on the site? If they stay for 30 minutes instead of 30 seconds, you go way up in terms of search engine. Wow, I don't know what's going on there, but that must be a great site because everybody stays there a long time. If they come back more often, so much the better. If they share it or link to it, so much the better. So they're trying to, and if it's mobile enabled, if it has video and audio on it, that not just tons of writing that's hard to read on a 4-inch screen, again, all these things push you way up in terms of search engine. So I have people who only do this because they just want to meet people. I have people who only do this because they want to hope that will get shared and content that will virally get passed around. And a lot of them that do it just because they want content to fill up their social media and their site and bring people back and keep them there longer. Notice I didn't say audience. That's still the elusive thing. Gee, I thought this was just a marketing trick, and you're telling me people actually listen to these things? Oh my God, what am I going to do with that? We're still trying to figure that out. Do we sell them stuff? Do we have events? Do we sell them books? Do we become Tony Robbins and they want to come out and see your seminar because they've listened to your podcast? I don't know. Any and all of that. There's lots to still be figured out. But the reason most businesses, and again, not many businesses still have adapted this, but those that have done it to brand themselves. Hey, I'm a thought leader. Look at me. Look at who I know. Look at what I know. To meet people, to create content for their site and their social media, And all of that content then becomes a way you get found. Because the theory is, in today's world, if you want to get found, you got to create content. Because when I go on YouTube, I'm looking for an answer. I'm not looking for an orthopedic surgeon. This isn't the Yellow Pages anymore. I'm looking for somebody who can solve my problem. So if you show me through your blog, through your video, through your podcast that you know what I'm talking about and you can help me solve this problem, then I'll start a conversation with you. But if you just say, call me, I'm the best orthopedic surgeon, I got the best rates, I got the best hours, I don't care. How do I know you're going to help me? So all of that is the theory behind why, and we've had to sort of figure this out as we've gone. Now, the two of you, I didn't hear a business proposition in there. So again, a podcast may be a personal passion project. I just want to tell the world. It might be a way, I think it was Eileen that says she's got writing a book. We have a lot of people do podcasts in support of a book. The podcast shows you what the book's about each and every week and who you are. You bring other people. It helps you write the next edition and the next edition. You collect all these stories about resiliency or whatever the topic of your book is. And the podcast feeds the book and the book feeds the podcast. The podcast drives people to the book and the book drives people to the podcast. It's a very powerful way to promote books. I don't know what, I'll ask a question again here because I'm just talking too long. So Ann, what if you did a podcast, what would you do it on? No, we lost you again there. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you, yes. So if you did a podcast, what do you do for a living or what would you want to talk about?
I am thinking about something. I'm not quite ready to divulge what it is.
Okay, so can you just give us a broad parameter? Is it a business? Is it a book?
Personal.
Okay.
About
just something you want to tell the world or some point of view or some philosophy?
It's something I'm intrigued by.
Okay.
But I'm not ready to actually.
Well, let's talk about intriguing. So the kinds of what kind of podcasts have been successful? There've been 3 or 4 types of podcasts. I'm still in the wilderness. Most businesses still are bewildered by how to do a podcast and why would I do a podcast unless it's to get 8 million people to listen to me. And then what would I do with it? I've tried to argue there's other reasons to do it. Branding, networking, prospecting, content creation, social media, SEO, all these things. So the people who do podcasts that we've all seen, NPR, National Public Radio, has been the biggest creator of this. They get more listens on their podcasts than they do over the air on their stations. Originally, these were just recorded versions of their shows, but now they create actual podcasts. Great American Life, Serial, all these podcasts we all know very, very well. And they really have pioneered this idea of serialized storytelling. We're going to delve into a topic, Dirty John. The story that came out of the LA Times, it got turned into a podcast series, it got turned into a TV show. We're going to investigate some world that you've never seen before. That's always fascinating. And each and every week, we're going to dive into it and talk about it and bring the people to life who either live in that world or used to live in that world. Fascinating idea. Very hard to make money off of that because the only 2 ways you can make money is you get a really big audience and you get Coca-Cola to sponsor you or something. Or, and this has been the most intriguing one, you sell it to to one of these cable networks, to one of these online networks. They are actively buying podcasts and turning them into TV shows. Homecoming got turned into one on Amazon. Dirty John got turned into one. I think there's been 20 or 30 that they've bought in development. And why? Because it's intellectual property that's already been developed. It's a story that's already been figured out. And it should be a story of a world I've never seen before, with lots of life and death situations in it, and hopefully a ticking time clock every week. We're getting closer. The bomb's going to go off. Something's going to happen. He's going to get executed. Something's going to happen. If you can kind of build those 3 elements into it, a lot of people are looking to buy those. And they assume, because in the old days, I used to be in the entertainment industry. I had an entertainment PR firm 100 years ago. I handled Johnny Mathis and Anthony Quinn, a whole bunch of other people back in the 80s. And in those days, they looked for books or plays to turn into a movie or a TV show, because they figured that somebody fleshed out the story and done the hard work, and they'd found an audience for it, even if it was a small audience, and they could build upon that. Everybody who read the book will watch the TV show. There was a built-in audience. Now they're looking at podcasts the same way. So if you have an intriguing world or an intriguing topic, and particularly if it has life and death and lots of weird stuff in it, that a world I've never seen before, and if there's any sort of time sense, it's got to happen. They've got to solve it by the end of the show here. A very, very powerful way. And there have been some very successful companies. I wish I was one of them, but I haven't figured out how to crack that nut yet. So there is that weird possibility too. Other than that, it's really a passion project then, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort to do. You believe in knitting, and you just want to tell the world about knitting. God love you. There's billions of those kinds of podcasts out there, but I don't know how you're going to sustain it over the long time, because it's going to take time, effort, maybe even money, and the likelihood of selling sponsorships or ads are small for most of us. So, any questions about that's the business model of podcasting? Anything that you want to ask about? We'll start with Eileen.
No, I think you covered it very clearly for me. Thank
Okay.
you.
And Anne, does this make you more intrigued, or have you tuned out now here?
No, I haven't tuned out. No, it's interesting. I didn't realize that I thought people were making money. So
Everybody
I didn't
thinks
realize
that.
there's no money. I'm familiar with the Dirty John thing because it was local Orange County.
Yeah.
I know they turned it into it. I thought it started from an LA Times
It was an LA Times piece.
person, and then they sold
Yeah.
it to TV. So that guy made.
Yeah,
money
it was
obviously.
a company called Wondery, if you want to look them up. Wondery is a guy, Hernan Lopez, who I had a brief conversation with years ago. He was some executive at Fox, and he got the idea that we could develop podcasts, and if we stuck with them long enough and built an audience, we could sell these. And he's built a very successful business off, and that was that. He has a staff of people, and they look for these kinds of stories, and then they turn them into podcasts, and they've got a way to money behind them that they push them out actively and run ads and try and get an audience for these things, all speculatively, in the hope that somebody will buy it. And he's sold a couple of them now, so he's proven
And
that.
it's Joe Rogan, right?
Joe Rogan, right?
So he's now YouTube TV because he had to have been successful with his.
Well, for example, I'll give you a fascinating story. So I got to meet early on, quite a number of years ago, Adam Carolla, the other one. There's two or three that everybody knows, right? Adam Carolla, this is I'm paraphrasing, but this is the story he told. He gave a talk, and I got to go backstage and meet him and all this other stuff. And because we're a radio station, and he came to Orange County, and so we get to go cover all these things. Kind of one of the little fun benefits of this thing. And I don't make any money off of that, but I just get to meet cool people. And so he came to town, did a talk, and the talk was basically this. I was on radio. I got fired. I didn't know what to do. He'd done the Love Line and some Love Connection or whatever it was, and got fired from the local radio station. So he said, well, just to keep my audience alive, I'm going to do this podcasting thing. And he said, in those days, it was very expensive. It was very hard to do. I basically set up a whole studio. I hired my producers and editors and everybody, and I'm paying them out of my pocket. And he did it for about a year or two, and he said, I didn't make a dime. And he said, it cost me $200,000. And he said, I thought, I was just trying to stay alive so nobody forget about Adam Carolla until I got my next job. He said, I thought this was just a way to get my next job. I didn't know this would be my next job. And then he met the guy, Norm Pattis, another very famous figure in syndicated radio. Norm had created syndicated radio at Westwood One back in the 80s when I was a PR person. And he basically said, we'll create a show. We'll give it to all the radio stations around the country, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, whatever, and they'll run it for free, and then we'll share the ads. We'll go back to Coca-Cola and say, we're on 100, 200 stations. Do you want? So we have half the ad inventory. The local station gets a free program and half of the ads. That's when radio started firing all their local show hosts. Why am I going to pay Paul to be a show host here in Toledo? I'm just going to get a free show and get half of the ads on it. Rather than try and pay Paul and hope he gets an audience and keep all the ads, I'll take a bigger, better produced show that has a built-in audience. And that's when radio started disappearing as a local medium and turned into all these syndicated shows, Dr. Laura and all these other people, or Laura and everybody. And Norm Pattis came upon him and said, hey, I sold Westwood One for $500 million. maybe I should open up a thing called Podcast One, and we'll do the same thing. We'll get mass marketed podcasts, big audiences. He's still in the broadcast model. And so they started getting other celebrity shows, Shaq and the Housewives and all this stuff. And I know they got 100 celebrity shows. And then he sells Coca-Cola ads on all of them, or whoever. And that is now Adam makes money off of that. But for a couple of years when he was just doing this, even though he had a big audience, he had no money, zero. And so it was he had to find somebody who knew how to syndicate and sell ads across not just across his show, but they sell the whole package of all the shows. And that has become a successful model, very successful model, but one of the few. So Adam, Mark Maron, those guys, they probably do make, well, they do make money now off of these things, but they're the exception. When I started 10 years ago, there were estimated, when they counted iTunes, which still has supposedly all the podcasts on them, they counted 250,000 podcasts roughly. A couple years ago went to 500,000. This year under the pandemic, it's now tipped into 1 million. So a lot of people sitting at home saying, I got nothing to do, I'm going to tell my story. And there's now 1 million podcasts out there. That just makes it that much harder to find an audience, to get found, and to find sponsors for it. So I don't know what keeps most podcasters going. Most podcasts don't last that long. They probably last 6 months to a year, and then people burn out. I've got shows that have been with me 3, 4, 5 years because they're making money off of it. There's tangible return. They're selling their books. They're selling their services. They're meeting clients. They're closing more deals. They're getting more traffic to their sites and stuff. So we've come up, and what I'm telling you, you won't hear anywhere. I'm always trying to go to conferences and stuff, and people are like, you do? Even when I told Adam, he said, you do what? He said, we can't sell business podcasts. I said, I do. So there's a small world of us pioneering this business idea. There's a ton of people trying to be funny because they all want to be the next Mark Maron or Joe Rogan. There's a ton of people out there doing celebrity stuff and sports stuff, and they think that's what it is. I don't think that's the future of the medium. I think the future is orthopedic surgery and Lithuanian folk music and some other obscure niches. And then it's a question of how you're going to make money off it. You're either advertising your own services and what you're doing, or you're going to slug through it and try and get sponsors and try and find little niches. And that can be done. I'll give you one example. I didn't produce this podcast, but a guy came to one of my meetups who has a podcast on FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Act. And they're somehow FEMA people, they're first responders, they're the kind of people that go into disasters. And they started talking about really down in the weeds niche stuff about FEMA and the world of emergency management and stuff. And I said, did you get many people? He said, no, but we got the right people. We got other people who are first responders, emergency planners at cities and stuff. And he said, we got FEMA itself gives them, I don't know, $3,000 a month or something just to get in front of that audience. And then somebody else who sells some sort of backpacks or weird gear or something. So they're making good money, like $100,000 a year off of 2 or 3 advertisers because they've found a niche that nobody else was talking to. And if you want to get in front of that niche, we got them. Might be small, but we got them. And so there are people doing that out there. But for the most part, most podcasters are doing it in the hope that they'll get a big audience, in the hope that they'll get a sponsor, or maybe the really far off hope that they'll sell the show as a TV show. Some are doing it to most that stick with it are either doing it out of passion or they're doing it out of some purpose to promote themselves. So I'd say that's been my experience on it. And I've done these meetups now periodically. Everybody's got a dream. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something to tell. And the first thing that disappoints them is I said, do it through YouTube then if you want to make money. This is not a way to, you're not going to, somebody else isn't selling the ads and giving you money for them. So any other questions about that, Eileen? Am I disappointing you guys, or are you still intrigued to learn more here?
I'm still with you. This is very good. Thank you.
Okay. What about you, Ann? Am I scaring you away here?
Oh no, as I said, this is for education purposes for me,
Okay.
and I really had no idea because I hear all these people doing podcasts, and I
Millions.
assumed they were making some money, and I know there was a difference between this and YouTube.
Yeah, total different. Set it for a different reason. Still operates in a different way. Now, that isn't to say some of that might change. Joe Rogan shocked the world. Just to give you another little aside, there was a Chinese company called Spotify that's come into this world, and their sole goal is to take on iTunes. They probably have overtaken iTunes. There's probably more people going to Spotify now to listen to podcasts than they go to iTunes. For years, it was just iTunes. If you had a podcast, there was only one place to put it, and that was on iTunes. Then Google got into it, and then Spreaker, Stitcher, SoundCloud, that was for independent musicians, started saying, well, we'll take podcasts too. All these people, iHeart, that was a collection of radio stations originally, the Clear Channel radio stations, until they all went bankrupt, and then people started listening to iHeart as a music. They went into podcasting big, so they have lots of podcasts on there. And these people started saying, well, how am I going to, they all want to be the site that you go to hear the podcast aggregator. They'll pull them all together, and I got them all right here. I got the catalog of all of them. I've collected them all in the hope that then they can, they're selling traffic to their site. They put ads, they put all this stuff up on their site because millions of people are coming there. So there's lots of people competing for that. iHeart's made a big push into it. And Spotify has come out of nowhere to really take on iTunes in a big way. And maybe because there's no real published figures, but the assumption is that they're closer, or they've probably overtaken iTunes in terms of listenership. How do they do that? They're trying to do what the online networks are doing. They're trying to produce their own podcasts that only appear on their channel. They're not shared. Everybody puts a podcast everywhere because I don't know. I'll give it to iTunes. I'll give it to Google. I'll give it to anybody who'll take it. I hope it's on 20 aggregators, so 20 times the chance somebody will find it. Spotify and some of the others, iHeart to a lesser degree, are saying, we're going to make our own podcast. If you want this show, you got to come to Spotify. It ain't on iTunes. It ain't in Google. It ain't anywhere else. And so they made a deal with Joe Rogan, shocking deal, to pay him millions of dollars. I think it's millions of dollars to move his number one high-rated show over to their network. So he's taking it off iTunes. He's taking it off every place else, and it'll only be on Spotify. The jury's still out. Will that work or not? Nobody knows. There have been some other models. Company whose name escapes me now here, is trying to do the same thing, but they're trying to do a paywall. So it's subscription only. We're going to have some cool podcasts, but you can only get them here, and you got to subscribe. We're not just going to give them to you for free. It's Netflix. You got to pay $10 a month or something. Jury's out whether anybody will do that. For the moment, it's you create a podcast, and let's make this clear. So how do you get it on all those apps? You have to have a storage site that you pay for yourself. Not much. They're like $10 a month. There's used to be 2 or 3 of them when I started. Now there's 23 of them. The 2 big ones are Libsyn, 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 or Podbean, like Jack and the Beanstalk. I tend to use that one, but just because I'm more familiar with it. They're both basically the same thing. They give you 3 things. It's where you go to store it. So once I record this today, I'm going to edit it a little bit, and then I'm going to upload it to my storage account. And then from there, they forward it to iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, SoundCloud, everything like that. And you have to laboriously apply. They don't do it for you, a couple of them, but you have to go apply, call up iTunes and say, hey, I got a podcast, please add it. And they'll say, okay, what's your RSS feed, your real simple syndication feed that your storage site gives you? It's usually your podcast plus RSS or feed or something after it. And then you give Apple that, and then once they link to it, every time you put a show up on your storage site, it gets pushed to them, and it appears magically on your free iTunes page or Spreaker's page or Stitcher page. Some of them are real easy to get onto. Some of them are real hard to get onto. iHeart's very hard, very vague, whether they'll accept you or not. Spotify and iTunes will take everything because they're trying to compete who's got the most. Some of them you have to pay for. Stitcher and Spreaker, some of them trying that. You want to be on our platform, you got to pay to be on it. SoundCloud and others. So a whole all over the place. But you have to pay, you have to record it, you have to store it, and then you have to apply to all these places, and once you do, then you give them this connection, this RSS feed, which every storage site will give you, and once they connect them, then every time you put one up there, poof, it appears on somebody else's site. That's the part that confuses most people. It's not YouTube. You don't just send it to iTunes. They don't want it. They don't store it. You don't just put it up on, and the same thing with your website. Very few website companies want you to store any of this stuff on their site. They don't. Some of them maybe, but GoDaddy doesn't want your audio content. It's too big. It's too much. They don't want you to go store it somewhere else. And then the other thing they do is not just store it and forward it, but all these storage sites will give you the statistics on it, who listened, how many they collected from all these places that they forwarded to. And the other thing is they will give you little players. Same idea as YouTube. They call them iframe, embeddable players, just like YouTube gives you, so you can put the podcast on your site. And it's really not there. It's just this little code that goes and pulls it from your storage site, just like the YouTube player pulls it from YouTube's massive storage farm. So you don't, everybody thinks I'm just going to record this. I'm going to get a big audience. I'm going to make a bunch of money. Somebody's going to pay me all this money to be there, and I don't have to do any of this back-end work. I just send it to them. That's YouTube. Podcasts, whole different world. You got to edit it. You got to upload it and store it somewhere. You got to create a connection to all these other places that then automatically will feed them. And even though they're playing it and drawing millions of people coming to the site to listen to it, they don't give you a nickel. Nothing. You have to find ways to monetize it or make money out of it. And yet, it continues to grow. Now, I've watched the evolution of this. I got it in 2010. So this started in roughly 2005, 2006. By about 2008, it had started to take off after a couple of years, and then it crashed and burned, and people gave up doing it. Why am I going to do this? I don't make any money. And so when I came along, it had dipped dramatically, and that's when I tried to figure out a different business model. Is there another, other than just viewership, listenership, is there other ways that you can monetize this? Is there another return on the investment? And the answer is yes. All those things I talked about: branding, marketing, networking. There are people that make real money because they meet more clients and close more deals and drive more traffic. And the proof is they've been with me for years. This isn't just a vanity project. So it crashed and burned, and then it started to come back up. And then when Serial was the first one and several others then came along and showed it could have a mass audience, that's when the Norm Pattises of the world and others started jumping in saying, well, then we'll do it just like syndicated radio. We'll get big mass audiences and we'll sell it, the whole package, to advertisers. But that has been a tiny, tiny fraction of the audience. The rest of them are still struggling to figure out, why am I doing this, and how am I going to get anybody to find me, and how am I going to get anybody to hear me, and even if they do, how am I going to make any money off of this? So I sympathize with everybody, but I'd rather tell you the reality than have you jump in and waste tons of time and find out, hey, this didn't lead to anything. So having said that, having said all the reasons not to do it, I think it's a powerful way to tell stories. It's a powerful way to push books. It's a powerful way to sell personal services. It's a powerful way to build a community that you can either passion. That's why people do it for politics is big. There are lots of political podcasts, lots of personal passion projects, lots of that stuff. If that's what you're trying to do, it's a very powerful way to build a community and a following, particularly if it's a niche community. If you're doing the only show on Lithuanian folk music, that's my typical joke. It just seems so obscure. You might not have many listening, but you'd have all of them. Once they find you, the word would spread, and you'd have that. You'd be known for that. So then you'd have to figure out, how does that benefit you? You just believe in this topic. You want to passionately pursue it, or you want to sell Lithuanian folk records or put on Lithuanian folk concerts or something. All of those could be reasons to do this. Okay, any other questions here? And I'm kind of got to go about another 10 minutes here, and we didn't even get into the live stream part of it here. That's kind of but it seemed like you guys needed more of the basic 101 podcast stuff.
I appreciate just how you're going along here. It's very helpful.
Okay. Ann, anything I'm missing here?
No, this is more informational for me, so I'm
Okay.
just curious.
All right, so let's just touch a little bit on today's topic. So one of the things, again, podcasting was a recorded audio. I won't go into the mechanics of how you do it. It's pretty easy. You get a mic, you get a laptop, you get some recording software. Usually the one everybody uses is Audacity because it's free. It was an open source software created that the whole community adopted, Audacity. And you just record something. Now, and I say nobody knows exactly how long or whatever, but I say it's a half hour. I say the more elements you put into it, intro, outro, extra, you can make it more sound like a real radio show, the better. So that's why I put all these elements into it. You know, I play stuff. We'll actually get stuff recorded like this. Let's see, where's there? I don't think I have a recorded intro up here. Hang on, let's see if I got anything. But you can create ads.
Imagine what it would feel like to lose everything. Your job, your home, your family, your...
Stuff like that. So we're trying to, and you can go to the Ad Council website. They have millions of these kinds of free ads, PSAs, they call them public service announcements that you can add in if you want to add some. But I try to make it sound more than just a webinar. Hey, okay, folks, so let's start talking. I guess that's it. I try and put an intro and an outro. I try and make it production elements to it. Everybody has a theme song like I did there, and we do some either we say a voiceover or we have a recorded voiceover. Let's see if I have one up here. Let me load one for you quickly, just so you can see what we do. Get out of that. Sorry, I should have had something loaded here. So My Jane, here's a story we do. Show, oh, come on. Intro, outro. Okay, so here's a show we do. There's a cannabis company. We do a couple of cannabis shows. No surprising. This is a company, and this is called My Jane, My Story, and they just have real women. It's a company that's designed to sell cannabis products specifically to women, for sleep, for stress, for other things. And so they're week in and week out, they have real women come on and tell real stories of why they use cannabis. Gee, I didn't think I'd ever do this, but boy, it helps me sleep, or it saved my life, or got me off meds, or whatever it is. And so we went and had a professional intro produced here. And welcome to My Jane, My Story, the only show that enables women to share their own secrets and insights to wellness, one story at a time. Hi, welcome to My Jane, My Story, that kind of thing. So we produce intros, outros. Again, not everybody does this, but I think the better podcasts do. You're going to put some production elements into it. You're going to play it. And then the question is, how do you play that into your computer? Well, you probably have to get some other software, or you have to get a little mixer, or some other. I use an iPad and some other things. I won't go too deep into the mechanics of it, but at its basic element, it's you recording your voice. Then you've got to add some other little elements to it that you're playing or whatever here. Intro, outro, maybe a commercial. And I'd keep it no more than a half hour. I think that's the sweet spot in there. Then you take that and upload it to your storage site, your $10 a month site, and then they push it out to everybody that you've set up, that you've laboriously applied to. And that's a podcast. Now, on top of that, we live stream it. Live streaming is crazy. Almost nobody live streams these things because things go wrong, and the connection gets broken, and the truth is, it's a tiny part of it. The majority of people want to listen to this when they want to listen to it. We get some live stream. It really took off when all the social media platforms opened this up. When YouTube, Facebook, Twitter through Periscope, when all those places started saying, hey, why don't you send us live content? And why? It's what Mark Zuckerberg said years ago. He said, and you can see, and I did the joke already, you can see my cat video anytime, but here's what my cat's doing right now. There's a certain urgency to watch something. Look at me. I'm at this restaurant. This is me right now. I'm at this concert. I'm here. I'm right now. So out of the millions of choices, the theory is the ones that are live have a more urgent reason to listen. you can be the first. I can be in it. I'm not just a fly on the wall watching somebody's video from last year or last week. I'm watching it right now. So all the social media are pushing hard to get you to stream live. They've made it very easy to stream live. You just hold up your camera or voice. And again, the only reason you'd want to, Zoom has made it real easy. We're doing this through Zoom. You can record this and put it up on YouTube and other sorts of things like that. I use some other software on top of that to live stream it, because it does what Zoom and Facebook and don't. It gives you different choices here. So if you went to my, let's see here, is it this one? Which one have I got here? There. So there's my laptop. So I'm using. You can now see my laptop here, and I've got some other. There's the other software I'm running up here. I'm running a virtual camera down here, so I can put backdrops against it. And I am also, that's the Zoom call right there. That's what I'm watching on Zoom. So I can switch between these different things here. I can have different camera angles. I can have different things here. I can even put things like this in. Static shots. I can put little motion graphics in here. I can do all sorts of things. I'm just switching between these different scenes here that I've set up. And now my video moves, right? And to show you one example, the example I was going to show everybody today, we do a show. We've created a new package, and obviously I sell these services. So we've mostly been selling people who want to come in live and produce a show here in the station. We've got the mics and the cameras and everything here. More and more people want to do these things remotely and cheaper on themselves. Our basic cost is $250 an hour to come in and use the studio. So you get like basically 1.5 hour in that hour, because you got to set up and do other things. So it'd be $1,000 a month if you did a weekly show, or $500 a month if you did a bi-weekly show. For $250 a month, we're just showing people how to do it themselves, like this guy, and here's one you can watch.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Rad Life. One of the things that we all have been doing in the last couple of months is spending a heck of a lot of time in our homes.
Try and move it up a little bit here.
So we have realized maybe things about our homes that are beneficial for us, some ways where our homes are not really built or designed the way we want to live our lives. Now that we're spending a lot of time in there, it's become a little bit more apparent. As an interior designer, I will tell you that there's a lot of stuff like that that's flying around as far as feedback from people, everything from the homes are not really conducive.
So anyway, he can do that, and then he switches to the Zoom to the other call. But the thing to note here is, I don't have a... He's set up a green screen in the background that he gets to Zoom, lets him put a logo here.
An elderly parent, which they brought into their home at this point so that the families can be united, at least during this time of experiencing that to a slight degree with my own parents, although when we built their house.
So it's him talking, and then he does an interview on Zoom there. So what he does is we work with him to teach him how to do it himself, and then we take the video and put it up on our YouTube channel. We've got 500 followers or something on YouTube, so he gets to be on our YouTube channel. He can still put it on his own, but it's in front of an instant audience. And then we take that and we put it on our LinkedIn audience, where we've got 8,500 people on our LinkedIn audience, and so his video that that he created, and we do three things. We take the audio off of that and put it on all our podcast channels. So he's got an instant published podcast. He just records it. We strip the audio and put it on our channels. We've done all that work. Then we take the video as it is off Zoom and put it on our YouTube channel, and then from there we share it on our LinkedIn channel. And from that, he's got an instant audience for this. He doesn't have to do all the other stuff. Now he has to have something that fits our kind of Orange County community audience. But so we're finding a lot of success with that. It's a do-it-yourself way to do it. It's somewhere between you're on your own and you're going to come in and hire a studio that's going to produce the whole thing for you. And so we've got that option now here. So for $250 a month, you can upload one. We'll show you how to record and do all this yourself, and that through Zoom, and then we'll take the audio and put it on our podcast channels, and we'll take the video and put it on our YouTube and our LinkedIn channels. So if you have any interest in that, that's our newest thing. And so far, it's kind of been an experiment. We started this a few months ago under the coronavirus thing when people stopped coming into our studio. And we thought, well, what do we do? So we created this new product that, and it keeps us creating content because our audience still wants content, you know. And we've had to move all our other shows to this format temporarily. And then we thought, well, geez, why don't we, all our other shows are eventually going to come back in. They'd rather be in the studio. They want the lights, the cameras, all the other stuff. Sorry, my green screen's screwing up here today. But if you took us out, let's see if I can take this off. If you just saw, there's our studio, me with the green screen behind it here. So our studio is over there and all this other stuff. So normally the guests, everybody sits in here. And but since they're not coming in, I created this little green screen scenario. Now I'm in outer space. And we could do a whole other seminar on green screen. Green screens, you can see I'm still having little issues with the green around my head here. You got to get it lit perfectly to get it to work. So now there's a new way to do it. You can still do it at home through Zoom. And if you want a built-in audience and some help and guidance behind it, we've got a new service. So that's one of the things we're throwing out there today. Any questions about any of that here? That was a real quick run through what I thought we were going to do for an hour to talk about live streaming here. You guys still there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
All right. I'm happy to answer any. So let's just open up for some questions here for a few minutes here. You know, there's just two of us here. I said we go an hour, but I'm willing to go a little longer if you're open to it and answer any questions you might have. So we'll start with Anne. Any questions? Did we intrigue you? Are you gonna pursue this? Any more interest in looking further into this?
As I said, this is educational for me, and I do not have any questions.
Okay.
Great job.
Okay. And this will be up on YouTube, so you can find it on our YouTube channel. You can go to OC Talk Radio, and you can see examples of this new Zoom version of it that we're creating, as well as all the other in-studio stuff. And we're in the process of moving our studio. This summer, we're going to be moving over to the University of California, Irvine has built a giant applied innovation center that they call the Cove. And it's a big 3-story building. And on the first floor, they have all these event spaces. And the second floor, they have all these tech incubators and VCs and stuff. And on the third floor, they've got their esports program, and they're building us a bigger studio. We're going to have multiple cameras and other sorts of things. So there'll be that as well if you want to. And again, from our studio, we can live stream it to YouTube and to LinkedIn and other places, and you can get even more production value. But, you know, starting off, you probably don't need all that stuff. You should, I always say to everybody, just get something and record it, learn how to put it up, and see if you get an audience to it. And then if you want to build an audience, we've got this kind of next step program. And then if you want to go from there, there's a step up, and you can actually get into a studio and produce stuff and have real engineers and real producers work with you here. So that's kind of the gradation we're looking at. What do you think, Eileen? Did we any questions you might have?
Yeah, I apologize for not being very responsive. I'm just sitting here pretty passively.
Everybody does in these things. It's
and benefiting what you're sharing, and I thank you for that.
Okay. Well, again, if you have any interest in talking about our service, I mean, partly we do this just to help the community, and partly we do it to help expose people to the different services that we offer. And if we can be of any help to you, you know, contact us here at OC Talk Radio, and we'll be happy to tell you about what we do. Or stay in this group. You know, we periodically, once a quarter, once every couple of months, we do something on some part of podcasting. And we try and understand, because it's not just me telling you, it's trying to understand what other people are doing too. I'll give you a crazy example to end with here. A guy came in a couple of years ago to one of my, normally we do these in person, these meetups. Came into one of our things. I went to the whole spiel of how to podcast. He said, I already know how to podcast. And what I don't know how to do is make money off of it. And I said, okay, what are you doing? He said, my partner and I produce a series of podcasts on the Cold War. It's a historical series, and week by week we go through the Cold War week by week. Here's what happened this week in the Cold War. Here's what happened this week, and we talk about it's a big history lesson about the Russians and us and the Cuban Missile Crisis and everything here. And I said, okay, fascinating. Does anybody listen? He said, we've got like 50,000 people. I said, I don't have a show that has 50,000 people. Oh my God, you got 50,000 people listening. He said, tell us about it. And we'd spend hours researching this and editing it and putting in interviews. And he said, it's just been a passion. Our real job is we're computer geeks. We work for some big company. And we put hours and hours in editing and researching and everything. We built this over 2 years, this big audience, and we don't make a nickel off of it. I said, you've discovered the problem. I said, you should need to think outside the box. You should be putting on a Cold War convention, like a Star Trek convention, where all the Cold War nuts come and talk. You have speakers that you've had on your show, and they pay to come and see it live and hang out with other Cold War historical nuts and nerds. And I said, you're missing the whole, and you create a book out of it and other things. And they were like, no, we just want somebody to, they tried Patreon. Patreon's another thing you can do where people can contribute, keep us on the air, donate $10 a month. I said, oh, you're going the wrong way. And they left disgusted. I never heard from them again. But it shows that you can get a big audience. It's how do you sustain that? And I think most people are looking for the YouTube answer. It doesn't exist in this world. You've got to find other ways to measure it, to monetize it, to make value out of it. So in your book, if you are going to write a book, powerful way to promote a book, develop a book, and then other things. I don't know if you want to do speaking gigs on the book or other sorts of things, but.
Were you talking to me?
Yeah, to Eileen, right?
Oh, yes. Well, actually, my book is already published a couple of years ago.
Oh,
I
okay.
did talks on it. I write a column over for Tasmania.
You write a column or I got to stop you there. You write a column in Tasmania. I'm an armchair traveler. I've never been most places. I've only been out of the country a couple of times, but I just endlessly read about all these places. And maybe it's because I watched the Tasmanian Devil on Bugs Bunny, but I've always been fascinated with Tasmania. And one of my best friends just went there and said, oh, it's amazing.
Well, yeah, I want to go there now, too. It sounds terrific. The people do sound delightful. Yes.
So how in the world would you write a column in Tasmania?
Actually, doesn't everybody? No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I mean,
Okay.
fascinating.
Like many things in life that happen to me and probably for other people, it's not a direct path.
Right.
It's just seeing opportunities along the way. I'm a life coach. I forgot. That's the other thing I do.
Okay.
So actually the life coaching is behind writing the book. Before that, I was a psychotherapist. So you can see this theme.
We've had several life coaches at different times. We had a guy, Doug Gefeller, did a show with me for years until he retired. He was the past president of the Coaches Federation here in Orange County. He was a business coach, not a life coach, but he used to do a show on coaching, and he was like in his late 70s. He'd become a coach to other coaches, and so he was always bringing life coaches and business coaches on and trying to help them build a business.
That's wonderful. Yeah. But anyway, with Tasmania, I wrote an article about firefighters. I learned that more firefighters commit suicide, who die by suicide, than on the job, and which is a horrible, devastating, and preventable type of event.
Yeah.
And so because of the raging fires that were occurring in Australia last year, that only totally resolved a few weeks before COVID-19 started. Mm-hmm. I wrote an article for the newspaper over there, Tasmania Times. Mm-hmm. And then out of that came my Q&A column that I've started writing for them. Mm-hmm. So I've got a few different things I do that complement each other, and it's just fun for me.
So let me stop you right there. So if I was your coach, if I was your producer, I'd say I'd contact the editor at the Tasmania Times and I say, tell you what, I've got a podcast where it goes into depth. There's the quick Q&A. You ask me a question, I give you a quick answer. But if you want to hear more about whatever we talk about, here's the podcast. And it costs you nothing, Mr. Tasmania Times. I produce it and I give it to you. They will pee in their pants because every newspaper is struggling with the same thing. How do they get people to go to their website? They can't give the paper away because then you won't buy it or subscribe to it. So most of their websites suck because they have very little on them. And what the Washington Post and the New York Times and all the Wall Street Journal discovered is podcasts are the key. The same reporters who are writing these stories, and the papers have shrunk, so the column inches have shrunk, everything's shrunk, the amount of content they can put out because it costs too much. So as the paper has shrunk, there's a lot of content that gets cut out and just thrown away. We researched all this stuff, but I'm only going to use this much of it, this tiny little bit here. So take that and tell the story rather than write the story, and turn that into a podcast, and that's what drives people to the newspaper. If you like what we're talking about, these stories we're telling about firefighters or therapy or whatever, real stories, real people, and I wouldn't just talk about it. I'd talk to real firefighters who've lived through this, or their wives or families that have suffered this. It'd be a series of discussions, for example, on suicide in the firefighter community. And you wouldn't just tell the statistics, but you would talk to the people who suffered through it or suffered because of it and tell their stories, give voice to their stories. And why would the Tasmania paper run it? Because it's free content for them to come to the website, and it drives people. If you like this, then go buy the paper, because we have this columnist who writes about this all the time. It's the teaser that gets people to come in. It's the content that drives them to the website, and it's the tease of what's going on in the paper. And that's how you would promote your column and build your following there for them. Now, they wouldn't pay you for this, so you wouldn't make any money, but you'd be more likely to get more audience and more attention to you're promoting your column, not just hoping they promote your column. And there, I think I think our friend Ann's dropping out here. Okay, but I hope we helped you. So you then this would be a way you promote yourself as an author, and then in so doing, well, the Firefighters Association of Tasmania would want to hire you to be a consultant or to come coach them or give talks, or how do we fight this and everything else. You could develop a whole, and you'd send it to the Firefighters Association of Australia and Tasmania and all this stuff, and share it with them too. So it's the opposite. You'd create content to create a market, rather than what everybody else is. I want to be paid for the content that I create. Content is a way to open doors today. Content is not a way to make money. That's a radical thought.
I hear you. I hear you fully. Yes. Thank you for all this.
Okay. Fascinating story. Well, if I can help you in any way, love to talk more about it. Other than that, any other questions? Anything I didn't clarify or make clear?
No, you actually gave me much more than I expected.
Well, good. Well, then I hope you will go to Meetup and say something nice about it. So the next time I get 20 people, 19 of them won't drop out here.
Yeah, they won't let a little rain chase them away, right?
Right, exactly. That's crazy. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to end it here then.
Thank you very much for today.
Okay, and we're going to wrap up and tell everybody that we're here. For those listening to the podcast today, and we hope we've learned something, and we'll play a little outro music here. Join our Meetup group to learn more about how to podcast and all the different things we talk about here in Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net.